Hi, welcome to my studio. I'm Barbara Swift and you're watching BSwiftArt. In today's video, we're going to do this. Fluttery butterflies with pink echinacea or purple coneflower as you may know it. I'm going to do loose florals, but the butterflies are just a little bit more detailed for contrast. And then we're going to paint in a nice background that has some soft little pink echinaceas floating around in the back. All right, are you ready to paint? Come on, let's do it. Here we go. I'm just putting water on my brush. We're going to do the wet on wet technique here. So I'm filling in just this bottom portion of the wing with wet, clean water. And I've already drawn in my butterflies, as you can see. So just getting it nice and evenly wet. There we go. And I'm going to use my purple dioxazine, I think that's how you say it. And I'm just going to mix up a little puddle of that and then just drop it into my butterfly here. So just kind of thinking about those little sections that the wings have, kind of like a bee's wing. You see those little lines in there? So some places have some dots that are orange, or not orange, but green, and I don't want to put the purple there. So I'm just taking my brush and wiping it off and just mopping up some of the purple where I want that space to be clean so I can put the spots there. So just wiping off my brush on some paper towel. And then now I'm coming back in with some it's like rose madder. Just a little rose just to make that purple pop a little bit more. And then behind where some of the dots are going to be, there's some more purple sections. So in this butterfly, I'm not trying to make it really super detailed. I'm kind of going with a more loose approach because I really want it to look like it's been painted with watercolor as opposed to like maybe acrylic. So I'm just kind of dropping those colors in and letting them bleed together. And then I'm coming back and wiping out where the dots are going to be. So try to avoid that in the first place, but it's not a problem because you can just wipe them out. So I'm just keep rinsing my brush off, wipe it on my paper towel, and then just try to absorb some of the paint. And it's going to keep moving until it's completely dry. So, you know, it's going to make it soft. That's fine, because that's kind of the look we're going for, a more watery look. And now the inside, or the back side, I guess, of this butterfly's wing is a little bit darker, and it shows just a little bit different spots than the other side. So if you imagine that the butterfly is laying on a flower, landed on a flower, and its wings are open, flat, you're seeing the back of the butterfly. So on the other side, if you flipped it over where you'd see more of the body and the legs, that side I'm calling the inside of the butterfly. And usually the wings are different. So a lot of the times the wings on the inside will be lighter and then the wings on the outside are darker. So I'm just coming in here and starting my little spots on the butterfly with some yellow green. I'm using Magello Mission Gold paints. And I'm just going to kind of try to avoid the green for now so that it doesn't mix together, because that yellow green would make kind of a brown if it mixed together. And now that this bottom wing is still just slightly damp, I'm drawing in some of those veins that are in the wing and the little sections that you see in a butterfly. And because it's slightly damp, it'll diffuse just a little bit. And I'm using thicker paint here so that it will do that. And I'm just blending it into the edges and putting a little bit of darker where the sections are. Try to make that really purple, but I still want those lines to show a little bit. So I'm just putting another layer of that purple on it. And I'm just using a round brush and just any brush. This is a number 4, but you can use whatever size you're comfortable with. Usually the smaller the brush, the more details you can make. So if you're trying to do a loose painting, you want to use a larger brush if you can, but you still have to have control. So whatever works best for you. I'm using the round brush because it has a pointed end on it. And I just bounce around from wing to wing so that some sections can dry before I add more paint, because if you put wet paint on wet paper, it's going to move. It's going to follow wherever the water is. So the drier the paper, the more in place the paint will stay when you apply it. So there's a little bit of a learning curve there to learn. You just want to keep practicing, because sometimes you want that line to diffuse just a little bit, so you'd paint on slightly damp paper, but if you want it to be real crisp and clean, it would be on dry paper. So now this edge of the butterfly has these little dots on the edges of the wings, and I want those more defined, and it's now dry, and I'm coming back with my 00 brush very fine, and I'm using a Payne's Gray, which is almost black. So I never really use black, very rarely do I, but the Payne's Gray is just a little bit softer. So I use the Payne's Gray. And they're kind of like little triangle shapes with the little dots are kind of a U shape. And I'm paying probably a little bit too much attention to the details, but that's me. I'm just detail oriented, and I just would love to paint really loose and free, but until I see those details in there, I'm not sure if anyone else knows what I'm trying to paint, so I keep going. But that's okay. I guess it's my style, so I accept it and I will go for it. So I'm just going to put a few more details on this butterfly, but at least the purple part was watercolor looking, where it looks like it had water in the paint. So that's what I'm hoping for. And you'll see as I go along to the other butterflies, I'm going to aim for a little bit more blending of the watercolor paint together. So, but this one, that's, I got more details. But what I really love about butterflies is those details. So I love the spots. I love the little dots on them and the little rings around the spots. And, just the little tiny white dots and all the stuff on a butterfly. That's what makes them beautiful to me. And they're all so different. I don't know how many varieties of butterflies there are, but I think you could make up anything in your imagination, and I bet you there's a butterfly that matches that or close to it somewhere in the world. So I'm just taking that 00 brush and putting another ring around those dots in the Payne's Gray. So I'll go from light to dark. So the Payne's Gray is my darkest color. And I started out with the paler purple, then went another layer of purple, make that darker, but we're leaving that rose color in there. And then just keep building it up darker. So now I'm going to define the edge of that wing. And put a couple more little lines in there, and you can see my green had bled into the purple, and it kind of made like a sagey green color, but that's okay. I like it. So do a little bit on his back leg, and his back leg and his body, they have pattern on them too. They're not just black on this butterfly. So I'm kind of cutting that out, little slice of white there, leaving that white. And then on this top of its head, it has like a little crest that kind of goes backwards. And then the legs, just putting a few legs. I don't have to put in every single leg. I might add a few more legs after I get the flowers in there, but for right now I just want to tell myself what I intend for it to be landing on. So when I go to do my flowers, I know a flower has to be under those legs somewhere. And I'm going to come with my Doc P.H. Martin Bleed Proof White and just add a few more white details on there that are more defined. So with my 00 brush, Just putting some little white areas on there. And just kind of making things up as I go, really. I've been looking at a lot of different butterflies on different sites, and I'm kind of really into butterflies right now, so I just love them. I have a friend who's afraid of butterflies, and I just can't imagine why, but she's afraid of them, and I think there's more than her out there that are afraid of butterflies, but to me they're just like flying flowers. They're gorgeous. And put a little bit of lines in there with the white. Now the white is very opaque, so you can't see what's underneath it. So you do that last. And it's kind of hard to paint over it. It's almost got a little bit of a chalky feel to it. So I don't like to use a whole lot of it. But sometimes it's great to really put in some of the little details, little dots on the wings. Just coming around like that. A little definition. So there. He's about done. Gotta come back and put a little bit of orange in this wing. There in the edge. A little bit on his back leg and his body. A little touch of orange. A lot of the butterflies have just a tiny touch of another color. That's really opposite on the color wheel, so I wonder if God did it that way, because it highlights that extra color. And I'll put in a few more of the lines just to make sure you can see them good, because they do fuzz out on that. It was slightly damp. A little bit of white on there. And I'm just kind of going to touch up some of my little dots on the edges of the wings just to even them out. And I put a little bit of that Payne's gray in between the spots on that back wing. Yeah, some more white. And then it was almost like a little lacy ruffle on this butterfly on that back wing. So I went ahead and put that in with my 00 brush. And then there. So we're moving on to all the butterflies. This video was like over 8 hours long for actual painting, so I don't think you want to sit here for 8 hours. So I just kind of am showing you what I came up with in the end, but it's the same technique, starting with your light colors to your dark. I like the way this one turned out. I like how the colors blended together, and I got that watercolor look I'm looking for in that one. That was my favorite one out of them. And this one I'm working on here, there's actually a butterfly with this hot pink wings. So I thought that was interesting. And then this one, yellow and a little tiny bit of blue in there, little tiny bit of orange. And then I used the Payne's gray again. So they're all different. They probably are from all different parts of the world, but in my world, they all fly together. It can be whatever you like. It's your painting. No right, no wrong. See all those little dots in there? I love the little dots. And then this one's so soft. Very soft, and those colors blended really nice. But you get the picture. I did them all in the same techniques, just different colors. And just kind of did a loose drawing underneath. So there's all 5 of my butterflies. Now we're going to go start with the field of the purple cone flowers. I just took the top of the flower, the little cone part, and drew one of pencil real lightly under the 3 butterflies that are landing on something. So I did that first, and now I'm taking my round brush, and I'm going to use my rose madder, and I'm just going to do that simple petal brush stroke. So you're going to start off with light pressure, press down on your brush, drag it across, and then bring it up, light pressure. And that'll make that elongated shape with points on both ends. So it's all just pressure in your brush. So right here, I can't do too much of it because I don't want to cover up this butterfly. So I'm just going almost up to it, then coming back with the point of my brush and just filling it in. But that was the little bit. Make sure you put that little edge of that petal where it might poke through behind the butterfly. And now it's still wet. You can still see that shine on the paper. And I'm just adding a little bit more of that rose and putting it darker towards the cone part of the flower and then a little bit in between. So there you go. Light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. So we'll do it again. Light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. You can always go back and sharpen up those tips. Light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. So you can see the brush bending flat. See that? Flat. And then bring it back up. And it's okay if they touch each other and blend together. That's fine. I'm going to let that one go right over the top of that petal. And then I'm going to just come back and drop in a little bit more color, especially around that cone. And then we're going to do this in layers. So I'm going to put more layers on this, but just want to start it out with a nice base. So this is my kind of my underpainting. There. So that one looks pretty good. We'll let that one dry and we'll start on this one. Same thing, light pressure, more pressure, light pressure. And then be careful not to paint over your butterfly. So the butterflies will all be on top because the flowers were already there. So the butterfly landed on top of it. So I'm not going to blend the butterfly amongst the petals of the flower itself. There you go. Light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. And being careful not to paint over the butterfly. And add a little bit more darkness in there, especially between the petals and from the center of the cone. And blend it on up so I don't get any pooling. Okay. So I'm going to get some more of that rose madder. And I'm going to start on putting some more flowers coming off the edge of the paper and then coming into the painting. So when I'm placing my flowers, as you've heard me say in other videos, I'm trying to place them so that they don't all stack up. So it's a little bit of a zigzag or a little bit of curved shape. Either that or they're pointing in different directions. So just to make it look more natural. So I'll put another one over here, and I didn't draw the cones in. I'm just kind of going with it. A little bit of blob of paint there. I didn't mix my puddle very well. So when I say mixing puddles, what I have on the right side of me is a palette, and I will take some of the paint, put it on an empty spot in my palette, and add water to it, and mix that paint on my palette. So now that that one's almost dry, it's still slightly damp, I'm coming in with a more concentrated bit of color, a little darker, so I put less water in my puddle, and I'm painting on top of the petals that I've already painted, so they're mostly dry. So they might be a little bit wet enough to diffuse this paint that I'm putting on top, so it softens just a tiny bit, but I kind of want it to be more stripy looking. I want it to be looking like those petals have they have like a little V shape to them. So I'm kind of bringing that down through and between the petals so that they have separation. And you can see that paint still moves just a little bit. I'll come back up here. And you can make one side darker and then go lighter towards the other side, as if the sun was lightening the one side a little bit more than the other. And so there I have 5 of my main flowers on there. I like to do odd numbers. I want to put a few little flowers that haven't completely opened up yet. So I'm going to do the same kind of thing, but all the petals are still pointed straight up, and that cone would be inside of these petals. So they're kind of skinny because they haven't unfurled completely. They're just curled up petals and they're just going straight up. And I'll put one down here. It's kind of towards the end of my paper, so I'm sorry that I didn't get it in the camera really good, but I'm doing the same kind of thing where it's opened a little bit more. So you can see those shorter petals on the top is where they're not opened as much, and these bottom ones have already kind of let loose. So make different shapes of flowers. Make that dark go around there. And then this one's going to be kind of coming behind this butterfly. And it's open, and the cone flowers, they kind of droop down, the petals droop down when they're open, so they don't open up flat like a daisy. I had a lot of these in my garden too. They're so pretty. And then you have echinacea is what their botanical name is, and that they put in a lot of cold remedies. So I used to feel a cold coming on and take 2,000 milligrams of echinacea supplements, and my cold would go away. Hey, I'm not a doctor. It worked for me. I don't know how good it is, but it worked for me. So that's what I did. So I used to love that little remedy, little natural remedy. Kind of like Zicam now with the zinc. I do that. Whatever works, because who wants to have a cold? It works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. And that one's going to be coming in a different direction. A little bit different. And I'm going to fill the whole page. So it's a field, and then the butterflies are flying in the field. So it's a field of purple coneflowers. Another bud I painted up there at the top. And paint another one right over here. And I think that's about all. Or I could put one right over on this side. Oh, we'll just kind of throw in another purple coneflower there. So I want it to be continuous around. I thought about leaving a little blank space there, but yeah, it's a field. So there should be lots of flowers. And then come back over those ones that I just painted and put that darker, thicker concentration of paint in. And deepen it up towards the center just a little bit. Just like we did the other ones. So I'm kind of going on one side then the other to kind of show that it's bending. I'm doing the same thing so they all, look pretty much the same, just different directions. And it's still damp, so that paint can still move around and soften. Like a little bit darker on the one side. And we'll finish up this one here. Okay. And also those little buds on the top. You don't want to miss them. And they're just all petals straight up. There. That looks like enough flowers, I'd say. Now I gotta start thinking about the stems and how I want to place them. The purple cone flowers have really thick stems, kind of like a Gerber daisy. They're really thick. They have to be to hold up that cone on the top. The cone is, a lot of the flower, a lot of weight in that cone, lots of little seeds, I guess. So I went ahead and erased my lines that I had in there, and I'm going to put the cones in before I put the stem so I don't paint over where a cone should be, and then I got a stem stuck there, so we'll do the cones first. So I'm starting out with the yellow. I'm using a dark yellow. It has a little bit more orange in it, and let's see, what is that called? It is Permanent Yellow Deep. Put a little bit of that orange in there. And that's where the sunshine is hitting it. And I'm not filling in every single space. I'm leaving some white because they're very textured. They're like little, almost like a sunflower center, you know, but it's a hard cone and they're really dark. They're brown, but I'm going to start out with my lightest color and then I'm going to add some more to it. So this way I have the opportunity to put some highlights where the sun would be hitting it on the top of the cone flower. So I'm being very careful not to fill in every single spot, and I'm also being careful to avoid the legs on my butterflies because they will bleed because they're done with watercolor. So I try to put the dots around them or not disturb them once I put the paint on top. In hindsight, you can always put those legs on afterwards and you don't have to worry about that at all. And that one had a little bit more water in it, so I'm coming back and deepening that up just a bit. There we go. And then we'll just continue on putting the cone on the cone flower. And this one here, the flower's looking almost straight on at you. So the yellow will be a little off center. And now I am adding another color that has still got a lot of warmth to it. And this is called light red. It's orange, real orangey brown. So I'm gradually doing kind of like an ombre effect where it's going from the part where the sun's hitting it, and then at the bottom I'm going to go ahead and add Van Dyke brown, which is a dark brown. But right now I'm using, it's called light red in the Magellan family. Now whatever paint you have might have different, they have the same names, but they might be almost a different shade of that color depending on brands. So it's always good to test your paint on a little piece of scrap paper to make sure that it's the color you want before you add it to your painting. Okay, now I'm coming back in with that Van Dyke brown, which is a nice dark brown, and I'm kind of concentrating just to where the petals meet the cone. So in the garden, these would look probably all brown. But for our painting, so that it doesn't look flat, you know, we want to add where the sun's shining on it. So that's why we did those yellows and that red. And those colors kind of peek through. So very carefully, I'm putting that cone in the middle of these little buds too. Trying to wrap around the leaves there, avoiding the petals. Okay, so I think I'm going to go back now with just some light rose and add a few little more petals that are kind of underneath. So I'm just adding a few more in there to fill them out a little bit. Not too many, one or two on each one. Kind of getting it to look a little bit more fuller. So if you put some on the sides there, kind of on the side of the cones to make it look fuller. And even on those little buds, there's probably some petals that peek out from behind. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of a puddle of my green, and I'm going to use sap green. I like sap green because it's got that yellow in it. So it's a good green to always start out with. And then mix in just a little dab of olive green in there. And that kind of muddies it up a little bit. I don't want to say muddy, but makes it more realistic looking, I suppose. So the two colors, just mix them a little bit on your palette and then make that for your stems. I'm sorry, I got this one kind of cut off on the bottom there. The same thing, I'm making one side of the stem and then thickening it up and putting some more paint on the other side. And then kind of weaving it through so the petals of the flowers are on top. So you kind of got to paint around them as you bring your stem down. So each flower has a stem. Sometimes they're buried into the next flower and you don't have to paint all the way down. But each flower has a stem. And then on these petals, the little buds there, they have these little leaves that kind of curl back. And that's where it might be in between that flower, and there we go. And that stem can be a little thinner because it's just a little tiny bud right now, so it doesn't need to support it much, but they'll thicken up as they grow. And we'll just put one right in here, which is not going to show too much behind that flower. And I'll cross it over this one so that all the petals aren't, or all the stems aren't straight down. They kind of crisscross and bend a little bit. But they're pretty straight, you know, they curve just a little bit, but they're not like a poppy that could have a real curvy stem, or the delicate flowers like pansies, you can put curvy stems in with those. So the more lightweight the flower is, the stem might have a little bit more movement in it. But if it's a heavy flower, or like a rose or something, the stem is almost woody. So it's going to be pretty straight. Maybe a curve in it, but, you know, thicker. And then the ones where that butterfly is standing on top of the flower there, it's going to have to be behind the next butterfly. So I'm thinking about that while I'm painting in this stem here. Just kind of put a little dot between those petals to show that the stem's there. Bring it on down. And then this one too, so put out those little outer leaves that have peeled back from the bud. And bring that one down. And I'm not going to bring it all the way down to the bottom. Just make it confusing on the bottom. Okay, so I think I have enough stems in there, and they're different sizes for the different size of flowers. So the buds are thinner stems. And I'm trying to decide which brush should I use. I'm going to do a little bit of a background, but first I want to put in some soft echinacea flowers that might be way in the background, so they're not going to have any details. So I'm going to put those in. I'm also putting in some leaves. So with the green, I'm putting in the leaves. I'm using a flat brush. See that flat brush? Putting it on its side. So I'm using the fine flat top of the brush instead of using the fatter rectangle part. And I'm just kind of curving it around in little C-shaped strokes. I just put a few little leaves in there. There wasn't a lot of room for leaves. But you can turn your brush when you're putting the leaves in, and that'll make your leaves different shapes. So practice on a side paper before you do that, and get used to using that rectangle brush. You could use your round brush to make your leaves too, just like the petals, but a bigger round brush, and do that same kind of light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. But I chose to use that rectangle brush, flat brush. Now I'm coming in with my 00, and I'm using my favorite Opera Pink, which is super bright. But I just wanted to get a little bit more pink around that cone and make that pop out, because the pink's a little deeper around the cone area. And then also I want to define a little bit of those lines that make it look like it has creases in the leaves. And to separate the petals, not the leaves. I'm going to separate the petals. So I'm putting that Opera Pink in close, and then just drawing out a few little stripes, little veins in the petals, close to the cone. There. And I'm going to go through and do that to all of them. And the little petals are buds. Put that pink in there. But I'm not doing it on those light background petals that we put in. I'm just going to let those be in the background. So no definition in those. They're not the center of the show. They're not the star of the show. There you go. So I'm just going to put that pink in and liven it all up, make it pop. And it also kind of puts a little bit of shape into the petal. So being darker towards the cone, it makes it look like those petals curve a little bit outward. And defining them as individual petals. I'm using that 00 brush. Now that one I did define a little bit because it balanced the shape of the flower. So it's not really a background petal. I just thought it kind of needed one. It looked a little off center, like somebody plucked a petal off that one side. I'll put that pink in there. And I'm using a pretty watered down opera pink. It's almost fluorescent, full strength. So I am making a little puddle, and I'm making it, you know, kind of the consistency of skim milk. So you can still see through that. I'm going to do a video about consistencies of paint. And the way I like to think about it is all the differences of the thicknesses of dairy. So you're thinking of how thick that paint is, even though they're all mixed with water. But some you have more paint or pigment in it, and some of them you have more water than pigment in it. So I'm going to do a video on that because I think that's really important to know when you're learning to paint. You kind of get the feel for that the more experience that you have. But I know I have some beginners out there watching me, and some people that have been painting for a while watching me. So try to do a little bit of everything. But I guess my main emphasis is to say that this is the way I paint. And I know other people paint differently, and there's no right or wrong. It's art, so it's all an expression of yourself. So this expresses who I am, and yours should express who you are. So be proud of what you paint. It's part of you. I'll just put some more in here. And about done with all that opera pink now. Now you can see it really made it more vibrant, more lively. So I want to go ahead and put a little more definition in the stem so they don't look so flat. So I'm adding a little bit of the green right on top of what I did already. So this is with my sap green olive green mix. And I'm just putting it on one side and then maybe a little bit deeper underneath the flower itself, because there probably would be a shadow in there, just to define them a little bit, give them a shape so they look like they're round instead of just flat on there. Now we're not going for realism, but interest. You can understand what I mean by that. So make it more interesting, adding more color, adding more shape, more definition, little crease in the petal or leaves there. And just on that one side, and you can see I put a little bit more underneath those petals because there might be a shadow right there where the sun's shining down. Define that one a little bit. And keep doing that all the way around your painting, doing the leaves as well as the stems. Painting right over that antenna on that butterfly because it's darker, so this paint won't show up much on it. And I got one more on the top here to do. And put some there in between the petals. Soften it out with some water a little bit. It got a little too dark for me. Oh, forgot that spot there. Okay. All right, so that looks like we got the stems and the leaves all done now. Butterflies are popping. So I'd like to put a background in it, but I don't want to put too much going on in the background. So here I'm going to show you. Got a lot of space to fill in with the background, and it's a lot of details in the middle there that you got to go around. So I just want to do something very soft. So I thought maybe some soft echinacea flowers in the background that have really no definition, but just that there's something back there. Just to look like there's something back there. So I'll put a couple of those in there. Sorry about that. Playing with the lens a little. I was trying to get a little closer, but decided I couldn't do that very well without making you dizzy. And a little bit of the cone on the top, just very lightly, and just here and there, not too many, wherever I can fit one in. I don't want to make it solid with the background of the flowers, just want them to stand out just a bit. Need a little bit more color, just dab in a little more color in that wet paint, and it'll blend and follow wherever there's water in there. So just putting a few little streaks of color in there. And remember, as it dries, it's going to get 20 to 30% lighter, softer. So I'm going to just come in with my flat brush, as big as a brush as you can use with having control of going around everything. And because there's so much to go around, I'm just making this background light. So I'm starting out with my lemon yellow, and then I'm blending the lemon yellow into the yellow green, and I'm just solid yellow green in this opposite corner. And then I'm leaving some white in that background. I'm doing this wet paint on dry paper. Leaving some white in there, so when I go around all these details, there's a little bit of white left in there, and it matches. It all goes together. So purposely leaving some little white spots in there. And then I'm moving from the yellow green to my deep yellow in the opposite corner. So I'm trying to keep in that yellow green family all the way around my background, but I'm changing up a few colors just to make it a little warmer and deeper on one side of the painting. And so now I'm going in with burnt sienna, which is also kind of more on the oranger side, and I put quite a bit of water in it so that it's light, and I'm just dabbing it over the top of the background I just did before it, so it all blends. So there's a little bit of the green in that light yellow in that left corner. I dabbed a little bit of the green into that, and then moved on to straight yellow green, and then moved into the burnt sienna. So then I put a little bit of burnt sienna in that yellow green, just a few brush strokes to blend it and make it all just gracefully move around the painting, even though I'm changing colors. So you're not seeing stripes of color or a real definition of where you change the color. It's all blending together. So you kind of have to do that while it's wet. So I'm just coming back because I can be a little bit more dramatic on this side. Remember, this is the side that I put a little bit darker petals on the purple coneflowers on the right. So I thought, well, I might as well put a little bit deeper color on that side as well. So I went ahead with some yellow ochre and put some of that in there, and I have the burnt sienna. So now I'm taking raw umber, very watered down raw umber, and I am dabbing that in, and I'll dab it into that yellow ochre that I used up above it. But right now I'm going in between the petals as carefully as I can, but I'm not worried about leaving some white spaces. I don't want to put this into my butterfly, or I don't want to muddy up my pink and my flowers, so just going carefully. But if there's a little bit of white space, that's okay, because we're doing it intentionally around the whole painting. And now I'm blending. See how I dab back into that color I already painted, but now I'm just taking some watered down sap green, which is the color that I mixed in with the olive green to make the stem. So this is just the sap green. You can see there's slightly different tone to it. So it'll stand out, but I want to make it lighter. I want the whole background to be pretty light so that the flower and the butterflies are the star of the painting. I'll put that into the corner over here. And as I'm working around the painting now, I gotta make my way back up to that light lemon yellow. So I'm gonna put a little bit first of the darker, the deep yellow deep, just like I did on the other side, and then ending that up into that top left corner with the lemon yellow. So remember, this is all on dry paper. I didn't wet anything first, but I'm using a very light watered down color, which I would call instant milk. So you know how when your friends had a big family and their mom would give you cereal with instant milk because it was economical, right? But you could see through it. It was watered down, watered down milk, so it could spread throughout the whole family. So I remember my friends' parents, you know, we had that when we had a sleepover or whatever. They had all these kids they had to feed. So yeah, I'm just going in now and deepening up a little bit of those centers. I'm using the rose just to soften up a little bit of that opera pink and also to deepen it around the cone. Just around the cone, and then taking my brush with just water and blending it out. That's just water on the brush there. And go back, get that rose. And underneath that butterflies probably got a little shadow, so I put a little dark in there. And now just water to soften it. And that's probably got a little deep rose there for a shadow. So there, just taking water and blending it in really quickly. I don't want to disturb the paint that's underneath it. I just want this to lay right on top. Just softening. Putting in a little shadows under the butterfly. I'm making it a little deeper. And around that cone, just making that deeper. So shadows are always the last thing that I do. There is a really great technique. My art teacher, Sharon, told me that she did all the shadows first in this painting that she did, and then built the rest of the painting around it, and that was really beautiful and dramatic. I haven't mastered that technique. I haven't tried it too much, so I always seem to just go back at the end and see where I need to deepen it, because I'm a very visual person, so it's better when I can see it rather than plan it. So I'm just taking the fine micron. I'm taking the number 5, 05, and I'm just loosely sketching over the top of just the flowers, because I want to make those flowers stand out from the background a little bit more, and I just want to have a real artsy look on this painting. So you know how I love to sketch, so I'm sketching over the top of these flowers, not adding too much detail, just a little bit. The stems, I'm going to leave the butterflies alone. I don't want to mess with them because I like the way that they are. So this will just be a separate element on only the flowers, and that gives it a little contrast. And this is optional. You don't have to do this. Some people want to just only have watercolor on their painting, and nothing wrong with that. But I can't keep my hands out of the toy box. So if I got art supplies, I want to use them somewhere. So that's okay. That's my style. So there we go. So, you know, people, you develop your style as you go along, and it's just what you naturally like. It's how you see it. So you can't really plan your style. It's just going to come out of you all natural. So the more you paint, the more everyone's going to say, hey, that's so-and-so's painting. I can tell. I just have to look at it. I don't have to read the name on the bottom. They just can see it. And you probably notice that too when you look at a Monet or, you know, the masters, and they definitely have their look to their painting. Look at Van Gogh. You know, and you know, his paintings with, you know, really kind of short brush strokes and, you know, very contrast with color. So I'm not comparing myself to them, but you know what I'm saying. Everybody has a style, and it'll just come out as you paint, kind of like handwriting. It's your own signature, I was going to say. Yeah, it's that too, but you know. And in the middle of these purple cone flowers, the cones there, they're kind of like little, almost little hard petals. So I'm just kind of making some oval shapes in there, so you can see that. And just playing. This is my doodling. I love to doodle. Putting those little shapes in the cone flower and a little bit of the V shape of that flower. It's got like a crease in the middle of the petal. So I'm drawing that. And I'm just going sketchy with it because that's the way I want to do it. And if you go out of the lines a little bit, it's alright, sketchy. I guess it makes an excuse, doesn't it? Hey, it's your story, tell it however you want. Yeah, sketchy. Got a few more here to go. And those soft ones in the background, I'm not going to sketch over those because I do want them to be faded away in the background and don't want them to stand out. So I'm just going to leave those nice and soft, just a hint that there's more flowers beyond these flowers. And we're almost done. Just about finishing this one up here. I sure hope that you're getting something out of my videos. If you do, leave me a comment. I love to read my comments. And I'll answer you. Yeah. I'll sign my name in the pen. There we go. Once you sign it, it's done. Usually. Give you a little close-up here of how those butterflies and flowers turned out. See, it's sketchy. Yep, and that beep beep is my phone. Someone texted me. There you go. So that's our painting for today. Flutters in the field. I'll just give you a nice good shot of that there. Get all my junk out of the way. There we go. Okay, so that's it. I want to thank you for watching this video to the end. And if you enjoy seeing my videos, would you please subscribe? Push that subscribe button and the like button, and the little bell will help you know when I place a new video on YouTube. And I'm putting one up there every Monday night, kind of late Monday night. So the people that are across the world are getting it. So thank you very much. So be beautiful, be colorful, be BSwiftArt. Peace and love be with you until we see you again. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.